Welcome to Climate Courage. My name is Andrea Edwards.
And here today you only have me, Richard Bussolato, because David is strangely unavailable. Not strangely, but he actually has COVID, which is rather nasty even in 2024.
Yeah, I've been reading some recent research on COVID. It's not looking good.
No.
Here we are. Anyway, so David, we hope you feel better and it's not too brutal, but I think actually more brutal is a better sign than the less brutal from what I'm reading.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that.
All right, so today's theme is resilience and humour in the age of the polycrisis. And I think anyone who's paying attention would understand that building our resilience muscles is going to be something that's incredibly important to do. And those of us who are strong will be able to help those who are not able to be strong. But the other side of things is if we don't laugh, what's the point, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you reckon, Richard? Are people starting to get the message? Do you think about what's going on?
Yes, people are very much getting the message. And in the UK this week, obviously, we've had tremendous rains. I mean, it actually is almost biblical rainfall.
Wow.
We've had lots of rivers bursting this morning. The news is probably 30-40% full of various reporters out in all parts of UK showing water everywhere. We opened up a sinkhole at the local football club in Wimbledon.
And you lost your roof?
Yeah, my roof is not so happy. We had torrential rains on Monday night, and some little part of it has actually caved in because of the pressure of the water. So we had water coming into the bedroom. Not how you want to get woken up, but it's getting attended to at least. But rather nasty, actually. And if you live sort of west coast in Florida today, I don't think you're in a very happy place.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing some crazy stuff. All right, so we've got a very special guest today because the lived experience is always worth learning from. So, Richard, would you like to introduce the wonderful Nico?
I will, and I already now apologize for the pronunciation of his surname. After all this time, I'm still struggling. But with us today, we have Nico Luvo. Was that about roughly correct, Nico?
Yes, you are very close. I know. Thank you for having me here because lots of people have been struggling with my second name.
Good, I'm not alone.
It actually means the elephant in Zimbabwe, in Ndebele and Zulu. But you can find Lovu around in Africa. So that but you did well.
It's not an individual name. There is extended family with sort of the same surname.
Yes.
There you are. Yeah. We're delighted to have you here today, Nico. Nico is a tremendous character who I'm known for some time, couple of years now, I think.
Yes.
You will not believe it, but the man actually lives in Scotland, but he has no Scottish accent. He must be the only Glaswegian without a Scottish accent I know.
Well, also the only Glaswegian we'll be able to understand.
Yes, exactly. But we're delighted to have you here today. And you have a phenomenal life story on how you ended up in the UK, which we will obviously touch upon. But your main profession is actually comedian. And that's something that we all think as we progress through this phase is going to be incredibly important because we cannot lose our sense of humor. If we can, not have fun and we stop laughing, then really what is the point? So that will be a central part of today. And we thought that you as professional comedian would be a great guest to have with us for that part. So thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for promoting me, professional comedian. That's good. That's
all right. So Nico, before we get into your amazing story, we start Climate Courage off with some of the big recent news, especially from a climate perspective. So I'm going to rip through 5 news stories that came out this week. And obviously you've already mentioned it, but we're seeing Hurricane Helene absolutely ravage the US this morning and this evening. We won't really see the scale of damage for a few more hours until the sun comes up in America, but it's not looking good. I read that it went from a category 1 to a category 4 within 12 hours. So it's pretty scary. And also how far inland it's going to go. So the Appalachian Mountains are looking at record landfall. So I think we're going to have more biblical flooding. On the other side of the world, in Australia, the government has approved 3 coal mine expansions. So these 3 coal mines will release 1.3 billion tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions in their lifetime. Going across to Nigeria, and I know that the rest of the world doesn't get as much coverage as what's going on in the Northern Hemisphere, but the recent floods have destroyed food that could feed 8.5 million people for 6 months. So they're already in a terrible situation, and it's a terrible situation that's gotten a lot worse. Going to Southeast Asia, and this is just Southeast Asia, so this doesn't include China, right? Boeing forecasts that passenger air traffic will triple over the next 20 years, and that will require 4,720 new airplanes. This is just Southeast Asia. But of course, the really big news this week was the planetary health check, which was released by the Potsdam Institute. And they have suggested that Earth may have, and it's very close to breaching the 7th of 9 planetary boundaries, which is ocean acidification. So that was a big one. But when you look at the Boeing and the coal mine story in Australia, I would suggest that we're not getting the message. What do you guys think?
Well, I think there is a very strong part of. I'm not 100% sure getting the message is the right expression, but we'll go with that because I can't come to think of a better one at the moment. There is an understanding that's getting much more widespread. People are owing up to the fact that, even a small child can do the maths of what this means in terms of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. But there is still a big hurdle thinking it's not yet hurting me enough and someone else should do something about it, preferably politicians. And as we've touched upon before, for politicians, it's extremely hard to push through policies which in the short run makes people feel poorer. That really is a very tough sell politically. So I cannot see that politicians will be the ones reaching out and actually solving this for those reasons. But I think that hurdle and the disconnect between, I see what's happening, but it's not yet hurting me enough that I need a wake-up call. That gap is rapidly closing because people everywhere will very, very soon start getting hurt on a personal level.
The idea that you've got to be hurt first before you do anything, that's what makes me go, oh God, don't you guys understand? The worse this gets, the worse this gets. But anyway, Nico.
For me, I think I will save this because I've got a part where I'm going to be talking about my involvement on the climate change as we talk today. So the message is not getting through. I agree totally. I think there's many people like myself, for example, from Zimbabwe, the villages, climate change is still new to me, like when we talk about disasters. But no, sorry, disasters are there since a long time ago, but no one ever paid attention why. So maybe I'll leave a bit now, and then when we go to my time when I have to speak properly about climate change, my involvement there.
All right. So, Richard, do you want to kick it off? We're going to do a bit more of an interview today.
We will. So, Nico, and I managed to pronounce his names pretty well, Luvo, as he told you, grew up in Zimbabwe. And he came to the UK and more specifically Scotland and Glasgow about 20 years ago. And the story of how you ended up here and the travails and the enormous, bureaucratic hurdles for you to actually come to live in Scotland is something you will tell us about because I couldn't possibly do it justice. But you're also involved in a great many initiatives, and you are the comedy show That Guy, where you are a professional comedian and a very funny one as well. So that's also a very strong reason for having you here today. But you're involved in a multitude of other projects, and I know you're heading to London later today. So please tell us, first of all, Zimbabwe to Glasgow. For most people, that's not a straightforward transfer, okay? I've never been to Scotland, but I cannot imagine it has anything culturally or climatologically to do with how it is to live in Zimbabwe.
Oh, thank you for having me, David. Sorry, Richard and Andrea. Yes, I just want to clear something. I left Zimbabwe, I went through South Africa and then London and then Glasgow. Yes, it's a long journey, actually. I think, if I remember, I left my village home in 1994 and moved to South Africa. I stayed there for 6-7 years. Then I came to the UK in 2000 as a refugee. And then I lived in London for 6-7 years as well. Then London became too complicated, and then I moved to Scotland. Scotland was the best place for me because I remember people always say these things like when you move somewhere, you feel like there's something, remove your mask, you start a new life. I was like, I feel like someone just opened my eyes, so that this is it, this is beauty, So I don't know where to start. I grew up in the village in Zimbabwe, Matebeleland. I'm in Ndebele. Ndebele was similar like Zulus. We share 80% of how we speak. And we are a very small minority in Zimbabwe, maybe 11%. The majority are Shona people.
Okay.
So I lived with my grandmother in the village. To see one car was a dream come true. So we didn't have much things like compared to the big cities. So I went to a school where we sit under the tree. Then we share the classes with other older children. So my education was very less. So most of the stuff I educated myself when I came to Europe or when I was in Europe and stuff like that. I like my village. I like to stick there a bit because it's really, this is where I'm from. You know what I mean? Like even if I have to leave this world, I'd love maybe to have a big wood statue of myself standing there, like this is where I'm from. Yeah. I remember in one of your questions, someone said I should maybe touch how was the politics in Zimbabwe at that time and stuff. I was very young, to be honest with you, but there's one particular, I won't say accident, something happened in 1983 when Mugabe opened the soldiers to kill 20,000 of my people. I was at school when the soldiers came. That's another traumatic I've got in my head. So since 1983, in Ndebele, people started to move around, like move to South Africa, different neighbor countries. And since then, we never had actually enjoyed the country. So we are not the people like really who can hold that government as a good government. And I'm not going to go too much in Zimbabwean politics for my family relatives' safety, because they're still ruling since 1980. So they've got so much very bad things happened. I used to be very active about that, what happened. And then because nowadays, when you're trying to talk about this issue, I'll be called tribalism. I was like, no, it's not. This is a serious thing happened. You know what I mean? It's got nothing to do with this because we're living in the world like now, got some words can be blocked, not to tell the truth. So as I speak right now, someone might think, oh, this guy's bringing a tribalism issue here. No, that's not. This is about 20,000 people died. You know what I mean? And the BBC called the mini genocide. I'm still angry about that. And Mugabe called it as a mistake. It goes on and on and on. So I lived in the young age very angry. And then when I came to this, where I am now, like I can express myself. I'm going to talk about my podcast as well later on and stuff. So there is a love I've got for my village, a love of my family, but there's no love for the government of Zimbabwe, And I don't want to talk politically, but it's just embarrassing for me if I say I'm from that country while I never actually enjoy it. Yeah.
So can I just ask, what was the population of your people before Mugabe carried out that genocide, which sounds like it is a genocide by all the definitions? What was the population?
I won't tell you the numbers because I was young to do that, but I think we are covered like 20% in the country that time.
And today, are there still? Do you still have your people in the country, or are they just spread out now across Africa?
They're there. They're there. The people, they're maybe 11% now from 20%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. There's some people like my mom. She can't go anywhere. She's 70 something. You know, I mean, which you know, I mean, there's a lot of people as well who let's look at 1980 when Mugabe took over until today. There's some people end up what's called joining them and end up to be part of that, because the only way to get a job that time is to join the Mugabe side or something like that. But some of the stuff like that, I don't have 100% evidence who's joined Mugabe and why and what they do, but people still there.
So are your people able to live in peace today, or is it still challenging like it was when you left when you were young?
For me, I think I'll call Zimbabwe as a failed state. So whoever's living there is not living in peace. Doesn't matter if you are a Shona person or developed person, whatever you are, Zimbabwe does. Of course, the government people, the members of Mugabe, they are living large. They got houses. But I'm talking about people like my family, my friends, and stuff.
Yeah. And Zimbabwe's obviously going through extreme drought and famine at the moment. So I could imagine that's also impacting the community today.
Yeah, it's been like that for years. I remember, like, it's not a joke. Like, people always ask me, Nick, how old are you? And I was like, I was born in the kitchen between my mother and my grandmother, right? Not even one doctor. After like maybe 8 years, the government came to the village and asking people, how old is this boy? You know, my grandma said, do you remember that drought? It's like, 1975. Yes. I'm like, hold on, guys. Do you think I'm 50 something? No. So I think the point is there's identity crisis in the villages. Now, if you are born, I was not born. You know, like this is always trying to talk to people. Like, I think we need to revisit that kind of life where when you're born in a village without doctors and then they come after 8 years, 10 years. How do they really know how old are you? Because my grandmother didn't know no numbers. She had never been to school. The only thing she remembers is that the drought. You know, like, so that comes back that climate change didn't start it now. It's been there for a long time. And people people like my grandmother knew it. You know?
It's a reality of life. I got Vicky from the Philippines, like her birthday, you know, what is it, you know? So it's always sort of tricky. Okay, so how old were you when you left? Were you by yourself or were you with others? And tell us about the journey, and because I could imagine it was incredibly difficult. I mean, we've seen some of the stories out of South Africa just in recent years, the building that was on fire that collapsed with a whole bunch of refugees in it that died. Was about 6 months ago. Everything's happening so fast, it's hard to keep track. But tell us about the journey. Yeah.
For me, I think my journey was not that extreme like other people. But when we're in the villages, we tried many times to cross the border to Botswana, get caught, you send back, try and cross in the other side of South African one, where that one is more dangerous because there's a river with crocodiles. So maybe I've done 5-6 attempts to get to South Africa. Then finally I get there. Only get there, we had some relatives already there, but they also like have poor jobs, like working as gardeners, maids. So they're not allowed to keep your relatives in the boss house. So what can do is just build a shelter like in the townships and stuff. It's just like, I was lucky for myself because I was always meeting people who got very positive things to do. And I didn't put myself in that group of doing bad things. So that's what I look at mine. I'm not gonna sit here and say, I had like of course it's still bad to be not in your own country, in your own house.
Yeah, when it's not by choice, yes, then it's devastating to have to give up what is effectively your home. It's different if you say, I want to experience something, but I can always come back and I enjoy coming back.
Yeah,
I think that's a massive difference, because all three of us have moved a fair bit in our time. You know, we're not native to where we're living at the moment.
Yeah.
But you know, in my case, it was purely by choice, by economic reasons. I was offered jobs in different places that I felt were more interesting and were paying more. And I knew I could always come back. I can still go back if I want to. And, you know, that's a massive difference.
I was going to add something that you see that fear of unwelcome. For me, it didn't start today in Europe. It started in Africa. Even if you're in South Africa, in Botswana, wherever you are, you know that they can tell you are not part of that society or circle. So, and secondly, I was illegal. You'll never be legal. You're always illegal. You always have no documents. You know, that fear is always there. You walk in the shop, you look around, maybe they're going to ask me documents. Then as soon as he made it out, he's like, yeah. So I grew up like that. I grew up like looking behind my back most of my life. You know, that is where it made me strong. Actually, people sometimes they think it becomes like a very best thing ever because you are late. You are work every day. You watch what you are doing, what you are saying, who you interact with. You become like an animal. You know, animals, they're always checking around. If the lion is around or not, they never settle down. So that's part of my life like that. I'm sure there's many people live like that. Even till today in Scotland, are still like one, of course, Scotland is peaceful, but let's be honest, there's other things we don't talk about much because people maybe they'll start looking at you negatively. But racism, for example, we need to also address that. It doesn't matter if the country is safe for war, but it doesn't mean safe for kindness. You know, there's always going to be some people who cross you every day. But Glasgow is very friendly, by the way. People are nice, but still something.
Cold but nice. Okay.
But I just because I did some tours around the Burmese migrant camps in Phuket after the pandemic, and the sister who took me on the tours, she was showing me these camps, and every single one of them was on a waterway. And the reason they were on a waterway is if the police came, they could run across and get away. That was basically why. So it's just what you're sort of talking about, that constant sort of awareness. But the other thing is, of course, when the floods come, they're also the first to get wiped out. So they have to be in these positions to keep themselves from being arrested, but at the same time, they're also putting themselves in danger. So, and you know, Richard, when we say we've moved, we have choices. Like I feel, you know, in my family, I can live in the UK, I can live in Singapore, I can live in Australia, and I believe as an Australian, I can also live in New Zealand. So that's 4 countries I have the right to go to. Without any, I would have to do a bit of paperwork for the UK because it's my husband's side, but people with no choice, no rights, you know, and I think there's such a deep lack of compassion in our world for people with no choices. And, you know, the wealthiest people across the world, they can pay, but for people without money, it's a brutal existence and that uncertainty. So how long were you in a state of uncertainty? How many years? Okay.
You mean in UK?
Just until you got the paperwork that meant you could legally stay and be entitled to some rights.
I applied in 2010. The rest of the years I was underneath the table. I know, and now I can speak about it because now I got the right. Before I was not going to tell you that story because they will lift him up. So I left in 2000. Then I didn't know how to go around about asking asylum and travel with different documents. So I was like, this is another thing I always want to try to explain to people, that it's about who you network with. So I was living with Australians and New Zealanders and South Africans. Those people, they don't get search for documents. They don't, you know, they don't even talk about how to go around to get your asylum seeking refugee status. So I thought everything was fine because no one is talking about anything. And then I realized mine is whatever account was expired. Then I'll start panicking a bit, and now I'm scared. So imagine if I stayed with African, for example, with the community of refugees, like now in Glasgow, I could have sorted myself long time ago, or either way, I could maybe been deported or something. But now, that's why I look at life. It's like sometimes things happen for a reason. Maybe the reason I stayed there with these good friends of mine from New Zealand and Australia and South Africans, that was God buying time for me to be where I am now. Then if I went to my community that time, maybe I could have been sent back. So which one is which I want to stand with? So what I'm trying to say to you is to keep yourself positive, is to, whatever happens in life, man, for me personally, I think there's a space for it. And waiting was one of the most worst things, because if you're not allowed to work, you're not allowed to travel. Even to introduce yourself to the people, it's just embarrassing. I mean, like, you can't say, I didn't know how to introduce myself. Maybe that's why I've come up with so many things, like trying to fit in, like do comedy and try to volunteer, trying to network as much as I can so I can find identity on these kind of things I'm doing.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it makes perfect sense, it's how you need to approach it when you are under that amount of pressure. It's very rational. And you touched earlier, Andrea, on this lack of compassion people have, but I would go even further and say there is a tremendous lack of understanding because we live in a rich world. Even the people that think they have a struggle and it's tough for them financially are significantly better off than the people who come on boats across the channel. You essentially leave your home when it's not by choice for economic reasons, in the sense that you're going job hunting, or you leave it because you actually cannot have a livelihood at home. And that is a purely economic, rational argument. If I cannot survive at home, I have to go. You look at what is it, David's favorite comparison is, the season is over and the wild beasts on the savannah of Africa, they start to migrate because they know the season is changing and they have to go or they will die. And fundamentally, we are not different. If I cannot survive where I'm living, I'm going to go. And to build that into some kind of why are you coming is completely irrational from political perspective, because you have no option. So you need to actually understand the rationale behind that decision. People are not putting themselves at harm's way because they think this might be a good thing to do. It's because you have to do it.
I'm going to get some freebies from this foreign government. Especially for women and children, and the majority of refugees are women and children. You look at the camps across Africa, what's going on in Sudan at the moment. These people, and the food agencies like the World Food Program, there's no way they can keep up with the demand that's happening right now. So it's very heartbreaking. Very.
Yes, and politically, if you are really, really brutal, this is essentially how you disintegrate the European Union. Because the countries on the Mediterranean are the ones that are going to be the first port of call for the refugees coming across from Africa, because that's how the map is laid out. And if you really crush food supply in Africa, and it's clearly going on in Sudan, and you spoke about Nigeria earlier, although Nigeria is economically a lot better off than Sudan. I mean, some people tend to think of Africa as one big place. It's actually not. You have enormous difference in economic standing between the African countries, and Sudan is probably at the very bottom. And if you crush food supplies there is no option but to move. And I am absolutely sure that Putin's war in Ukraine is to some extent driven by a desire to destabilize Europe, because that Ukrainian food supplies are largely going to North Africa. And if you can hamper that, you're going to create a crisis in Africa and you destabilize Europe. So it all kind of fits together in this very complex web of political and rational economic decisions. Because from whoever makes those decisions, it makes perfect sense, whether you're Putin or a Sudanese refugee.
I want to, I don't know, go ahead, Andrea.
No. I thought we could move on to when you look at the asylum process, I mean, so I think I heard it was more than 10 years for you before you got your official paperwork where you could feel, maybe just take a breath, right? Just say, I'm all right now, right? Was it 10 years? So, I mean, how do you, I'll just give you an example. I've just moved from Thailand to Singapore our family's moved for lots of reasons, but we've been unstable for a few months and it's just taken pieces out of us, right? This is just a few months. You went through this for more than a decade. So, and all this uncertainty. You didn't know. I mean, I'm sure when you left, you didn't know you were going to end up in Glasgow, right? So you think of all the steps that you took on the way, all the experiences that you felt. What did you learn about resilience? Like when you look back and you sort of reflect on everything that you've been through.
Yeah, for me, 10 years including like refusals, appeals and stuff like that, just to make sure that it's not like, yeah, so there was lots of difference. Resilience for me, I think there was a moment really I gave up. Like I didn't care what this government's gonna do with me. They can put me in the desert. I just have that, when you complete done, like you don't care anymore about life. But you're not in that. When I mean don't care, I don't mean like actually give up my soul. I'm talking about the system. I didn't care what the system's gonna do with me. I didn't care if they put me somewhere for 50 years. I just said that. Then I had this very stupid mentality. I said, if Mandela done 27 years in prison, I'm still young, man. I can maybe, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to create my mind not to worry too much. I had so many different thoughts. How can I survive this? Every case is different. I always tell people that my case is completely different than maybe someone who's next door to me or someone, but the system is the same. I remember my first interview take 4 hours interview. Imagine that, how scary is that? 4 hours repeating some questions. The other stupid question asked me about the newspapers. I'm from the village, I never see a newspaper. Ask me about the radio stations. I don't have a radio. You ask me about so many questions that I have they're not even in my village. And when you fail to answer those questions, that's why they call you a liar. We can't believe his story. And so there's so many things. I think I become actually inside an activist without knowing that. I started to to gang up inside myself like this. I don't know how to put it in words. It's like not very angry with how I get treated and other people treated, but without knowing how to fight it, So I will attend some groups like meetings, activists in Glasgow, for example, and I started volunteering as well in some different sectors like refugee communities. Like now, I'm still with NACOM. NACOM is in England. It's a project, One Strong Voice. So my voice become like known. So I get invited to these kind of places to speak and share my stories as well for raising awareness and stuff like that. And the more you share your story and encourage other people as well to share their story, even not to share, to give them that, what's called hope, that if Nico's been there for 10 years in this, me, I'm just been there 3 months. I think there's hope, I mean, there's something that, so I was not only doing for me anymore, I was trying to actually give other people hopes. Even some people, they get their papers in 3 months. Imagine, some people in 1 week, some people in 3 years, some people in 5 years, and lucky some people 10 like me. I know a few people who've been here 20 years and still on and off. So that my resilience came like not only for me, for other people to raise awareness and stuff like that. And I'm still doing it because I think there's more to be done. I become like a family of it. So I can't, even if I got my papers, I still don't see myself out of it. I'm still part of that struggle.
So it's like a trauma response, right?
Yeah.
There's one time here in Glasgow, I don't know, it's a quick one. Like there was this system of what's called the house provider for asylum seekers. They have this system, like if your case is about, maybe it's refused, they'll change the locks when you're out. They do this on a Friday. They know there's no solicitors, and there's no one going to help you. So you come wherever you come from, you put the key, it's changed. Now, homeless begins. And we have no clothes, and then walk around the street. At that 2013, I was homeless to 15, 2 years straight. And then I was staying with friends. And during that process, that's where lots of negative things happens. Like you become alcoholic, drugs maybe. And you're just in the wrong state, man. Just like, I'm lucky because I managed to pick myself up there. I mean, otherwise some people didn't. It become because the UK government used psychology torture. Psychology torture means like you become useless to yourself. So even they give you a paper, you have no what's called no hope yourself. You're useless. You can't look for a job. So that's why they give you benefits. You stay there. They know that within 10 years you'll be dead or something. That's like no, it's not funny, but that's what I noticed, that they use psychology torture. They're not physically killing you, but they'll put on that system where your head will be destroyed.
Yeah, so you got to have the strongest mind, right? So the Mandela example I thought was good. So before we move on to the volunteer work that you're doing with asylum seekers today, I looked at the numbers of refugees, and what's his name? Hans Rosling did some presentations about a decade ago before he died. Do you know Hans Rosling, the Swedish sort of data guy? Yeah. And he said everything's better than what you think it is, right? So, and a lot of people still think that's the case, but actually it's not. So there are at the moment 120 million people who have been forcibly displaced worldwide. And this is as a result of persecution, conflict, violence, or human rights violations. So there's 43.4 million refugees and 63 million internally displaced people. And when we're talking about the places in the world that actually host the most refugees, it's not the Western world, it's not Europe, it's actually places like, so number one is Iran, which actually surprised me. Turkey, obviously they do a lot for the European Union. Pakistan has an enormous amount, and Uganda, and I've spoken to a few of the guys from Uganda. So in 2010, there were less than 40 million refugees in the world. So we're at 120 million as of May this year. So it's probably gone up again since then. It's expected to double again in the next 10 years. So we're at 120 million now. So that's going to be 240 million. But when you look at climate refugee numbers, the estimates are anywhere between 25 million and 1.2 billion. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, massive number. We can see what's going on all over the world from the impact of the refugees. We're not doing anything to get prepared for it. Everything's temporary. It's always last minute. It's always a scramble. But we're going to have this enormous movement of people because of what's happening predominantly in the global north is impacting people in the global south, and they're going to be forced to be on the move. And the other thing that most people probably aren't aware of is a refugee has rights. A climate refugee has no rights. That's a really important distinction. So there is actually no global agreement on what to do with climate refugees. So I don't know if you guys know this story. So you remember Ethiopia and Live Aid?
Yeah.
So it was about 20 years after that event, after that drought and that horrible famine, they worked out that it was because the Europeans cleaned up their atmosphere that caused the drought in Ethiopia. That it was a direct link, and it took 20 years for them to prove it, right? So the people who are suffering the most, who don't want to leave their homes, are growing in number. They're going to be forced to leave. What are we going to do about it? When are we going to take responsibility for it? And when are we going to get prepared for it? So let's move on to the work that you're doing with asylum seekers a day, because I know you're doing a lot. You're doing so much. It's amazing. If you compare to your experience to what you're seeing today and to the mental health aspects that you're seeing as well, like how people are, the numbers, how they're being treated, the lack of dignity, can you sort of really talk about what you're seeing and how much harder it's getting for these people?
I think it's going to get worse, as you said. And secondly, very, very worse. Personally, I think I'll start by actually looking the African leaders as well, and all the leaders around the world. We don't have leaders anymore because celebrities. You see, when a politician becomes a celebrity, he doesn't care about climate change. He doesn't care about lots of things. In my own opinion, the refugees, especially, let's talk about where I am now in UK and stuff. We're always discussing about the safe routes. I'm sure you heard about the Rwanda scheme. It didn't work out, which means that was a horrible thing. And until we have a safe places where people can come and without getting harassed, without dying. You see, like the most painful thing for me is the people every year in the sea. Like every year, lots of people die in the sea. There's a documentary I watched. When the Greek gods, they just watch people die. They just stand there, do nothing, and people just drown and stuff like that.
Yeah.
For me, I think that's the things we need to start working on, those safe routes. Like what can be done to do that? I hope the new government in UK will start maybe planning to arrest those gangs and stuff like that. And yeah, in the moment we're trying, like where I'm going now today in London, we're going to try to create new messaging. You know, when I mean messaging, I'm talking about the language to campaign about making safe routes and as well make the government to listen. Because the message from last year was very aggressive for us because the government was also aggressive to us. But this new government is kind of like, they're all the same, but a bit maybe less. So we need to change the language first. We need to change our tools, how to campaign, how to actually raise awareness as well. For the climate change refugees, for me, even me, I'm still learning, to be honest with you, because if I claim asylum, said I came from Zimbabwe because there was no food, they'll refuse me, of course. They're like, oh, by your country's safe, right? But even if I say the rain destroyed my village, I was lucky. I'm asking, no, you can go back now. There's no rain. You know what I mean? So yeah, that is the most difficult one for me to actually go around it. But I think once you are here, I think we should be actually taken seriously and look after and stuff that. Yeah, I was thinking about this morning about what's happened now in Israel, Lebanon. What's good? Yeah, it's like Lebanon where they started fight. But I know we all talk about these wars in Middle East, but no one ever touched Africa much. Like there's still very civil wars that no one's talking about it, you know?
Yeah.
And they're going for some time. But people, I think the media is focusing on the way they get money. Because when you're not, if there's no benefits, they're not going to go there and spend time talking about you. So I think there's a lot to work on. When it comes to refugees, for example, I've seen we're going to talk about right wing as well, because there's lots of accident happening in UK this year about young people tending to be evil, you know what I mean? Because the right wing government, they give false information, all that stuff. Most of the stuff, the difficulties come from social media, the internet. There's so much, it's chaotic, honestly. Like I can't give you the point we are looking for, like how can we do this, because it's quite difficult to get through everything when there's no control who's speaking on social media, who's telling me, who's calling me names, who's calling me good names. So, you know what I mean? Who's gonna keep me tonight? All that stuff. There's it's quite, but some good people are there. Like the project NACOM, I'm involved with. There's some maybe like hundreds of members. They also volunteer to take a refugee. You know what I mean? They assess, okay, he or she can stay in my house for this week, or so there's some good people out there who are really wanting to do good things. Then there's some difficult people who are also worried about people come this country, but they don't have much to do for their lives. You know what I mean? Like you guys, I like when you said you moved around, but you had a good, you moved because you wanted to move around. But someone who also have a right to move around, but he can't be bothered to move around. But you just want to sit here and they never travel, never see how the world suffers. And then it tells you, go back to your country. But how does he know it's his country where he is if you never see other countries? So for me, if I have to say something around the world about this issue, it's simple. It's like we need to stop electing these jokers. You know what I mean? Like they become comedians. You know what I mean? They become celebrities. They become like whatever it is. I don't know. I was not born here in 1901, whatever it is. And I can imagine. I never see any book says the prime minister was on Jay-Z's concert, or the president was watching football. And, you know, they have jobs those days. If you're a leader, you're a leader. Nowadays, we're talking about celebrities. You see Zimbabwean government dancing on a young kids' concert. I'm like, man, you got a job to do, you know. So I think even in the United States, these elections coming, I think they need to start thinking very, 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 very difficult. Do you want to vote for a puppet? Do you want to vote for a comedian, or you want to vote for a politician? It's one of those.
Bad comedian. It's a very bad comedian.
But if there was another planet over there looking at us, they'd be laughing.
I know.
You know what I mean? So I think.
Oh, I think the Russians are laughing.
People need to be serious about. Yeah.
It raises some very profound questions and issues about the current state of politics, which is probably worthy of at least an own whole episode on its own.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of facts you cannot get away from. It's like, if you believe in democracy, most people do, you are going to get the kind of leaders you elect. And if you accept that, then you need to dig deeper and say, in my humble opinion, politics is about serving the country. I cannot remember many politicians in the Western world where I look at them and I think they're only in it for themselves. And that's a very different aspect to how politics set out once upon a time. You look at the founding fathers in the US, they fought a civil war or war against the British to be free. And it's still one of the most amazing documents is the American Constitution. Yes, women weren't allowed to vote, but these guys had basically fought and they had their independence, and they sat down and they thought out, what is it that we want in terms of publicly elected officials? And the common streak is all about serving. Now it's all about serving myself. And if I do 5 years in politics in a really senior position, how much am I going to be able to rake in as a consultant once I leave? That's basically the calculus. And it's a crazy notion and then we shouldn't be surprised about the kind of people that we see in politics. And ultimately, it does raise the question about democracy at large, and if this is truly a democracy that we're seeing, because, do we want to elect celebrities? And is politics a reality show, or is it a serious business?
Yeah.
But then on the other side, the serious leaders and the people that should be in politics don't want to go into politics because it's become so ugly. We've seen some amazing female politicians have to step out because the personal attacks are so bad they can't stay in. So we need equality in the world. We need diversity. All of those things are positive for all of us. This Elon Musk pushing this. We need the alpha males running the world. The problem that we've got in the world right now is because of the alpha males running the world. So we actually don't need more of that. We need a lot less of that. And we need a lot more sort of diversity and equality if we want to overcome the challenges we face. But yeah, to me, it's just, I remember doing a test at one of the businesses that I worked at, and 4 out of 200 people, I was one of them, came back categorized as adults. 90% of the people surveyed came back classified as children. And it's like we've got the 90% running the world at the moment, a whole bunch of children who are in it for themselves. They're there for their ego.
Absolutely right. It's what it is. And diversity, is thrown around as a very nice word to say we need diversity and we need that. And, in a biological sense, it's super important. If we speak to the scientists, biodiversity is crisis. But if you look at human diversity, for me, it's pretty obvious. If I'm building an organization, I've been lucky enough to, be part of building a few. I want people who have experience and integrity, and they need to be hardworking. Everything else doesn't really matter, Old, young, although, if you're too young, you're going to get disqualified by the experience part. But when I see how most organizations recruit, particularly publicly organizations, it's essentially you want to recruit people who are like me, which is, for me, the ultimate fallacy in how you build a really successful team in a business, is you want as many people who are not like me as possible. Because hiring a replica of me, a mini Richard sitting next to me, is not going to actually test my daily hypothesis of how things work and is this a good thing to do, because you're going to be thinking exactly like me and you're going to come to exactly the same conclusion. So you actually need yourself. And when you speak to the people who, you know, make a living out of coaching senior executives, it's like you want to have people who are able to say no. No, actually, it's not about saying no. You just want people coming in with a different mindset and operating in a different framework, who can see the world in a different perspective than you are seeing it. I think I'm pretty good at seeing the world from my perspective. What I need is someone looking at it from a different perspective. And that leads you automatically to what we commonly describe as diversity.
Yeah.
And most organizations do not have it, because there is that, oh, this is a different kind of character. And I'm just embracing that. I love to socialize. I love to work with different kind of characters, because it means I'm going to get taught something I wouldn't have otherwise. And for me, life is an eternal quest, essentially about learning and doing interesting things.
So if you're one of those people that's out there that's joining the political fray against DEI as some sort of wokeism, what Richard said is really what it's all about. It's not about being woke. It's about making you better and being more successful, because you're factoring all of the different points of view. So Nico, going back to talking, so I've spoken to some older people in my community who have bought into the political speech around, the refugees are overtaking the country. There's too many of them. They're kind of missing the government hasn't invested in it. It's delayed applications. It's made it harder. And then the whole Rwanda thing, obviously in the UK, which is just mind-boggling to me. But I've spoken to people who have been bought into this, and I've tried really hard and really patiently to try and listen to why they think what they think, and try to get them to see it from another perspective. But I wanted to ask you, what's your advice to all of us who are open to helping and making sure the refugee movement around the world is successful? Because any one of us could become a refugee, let's face it. So we should be a little bit more compassionate just from that perspective. But in the meantime, how can we help people in the communities that are, on the streets? And I think, those recent protests in the UK, I hope you felt good seeing the love and the support that did come out in greater numbers than the people who came out with hatred. But how can we talk to the people in our families, in our communities, to get them to listen and to be more open and understanding, and to stop buying into the political bullshit?
Well, that's a very good question. For me, I think all people are not the problem. I think nowadays the people need to watch is the 12-year-olds to 2025. Those are people who spend time on the right-wing internet networks and stuff like that. For me, I'm going to talk about my own experience. In UK, for example, I listen. Yeah, there's, I don't know, there's, I found out as you said, the old people of group, they're very nice. They're welcoming most of the people. Then you got another group that they're really not happy to see refugees at all, because the government, the right wing stuff like that. It starts with jobs, for example. I've seen lots of negative talks online, like someone said, or they come here, take our jobs, our wives, or whatever. It become like a comedy as well. How can you come and take someone's wife? Whatever stuff like that. And this person, he never worked in his life. He's about 40-something, 55 years. No, nothing. Maybe the refugee from Syria is a doctor. He's coming to contribute on the society, and you want him to go back, and you never done not even one job in your life. So I think the good government need to create what's called a system that not educate people to be nice. I think to be nice, you don't need education. I always say people, to tell the truth, you don't need to go to uni. You can see it is there. But I think people should continue to be nice. And for me, it works both ways as well. When people talk about integration, the reason why I always attend even the people that I'm scared of, I always go to their sometimes events just to show my head and see what's going to happen. Because if you don't get to them, they don't know. Sometimes these people, they don't know that refugees are also human. They're also people like everyone else. So I think the more engaging together, working together as a communities, it might change people. But for me, the powerful key is the children. Children, those are most powerful change, young kids, like from nursery to whatever you call it. Because like now I've got like families who are refugees here in my house next to me. They've got kids go to these nursery schools. They mingle with the Scottish kids. And the kids, they don't know nothing about this hate. They have nothing to do with, they don't even know they're refugees. They're just poor souls that get blamed, get hated without any knowledge who they are, why they are here. They're just kids, children. They have no clue, and that makes me angry to see that someone as an old person can hate this young soul, small soul who has nothing to do with this planet, who's just arriving, just happy to be. Even Scottish kids and African kids, they don't even tell who they are. They're just kids, They just love each other, and that's what I want to see the world. But as we will grow, we start telling the differences, and I want those mothers and fathers to actually look at their kids out there in mingle at school and come out as well, do the same as we live. You know what I mean? That's the example I want to use when I talk to the conferences. Like, let's look at our children when they go to mingle each other in this nursery school. They are 0 year, 1 year, whatever. They have no idea that you hate me. They have no idea that I'm a refugee. They have no idea if I'm poor. They don't care because they don't know nothing. They're just nice souls just arrive in this horrible world. Until if you can use that imagination, I don't see any changes very soon, because you cannot go to someone stubborn smoking weed the whole day, watching TV, and what he sees, that's what he believes. What I mean? There's someone go to the pub every 11 o'clock every day just to watch the BBC and goes home and go to the internet and bang on about negative stuff about refugees. So, we need people who got a future, the people who go out like, I'm not like myself, everyone there, to actually look for the positivity. And like, what I mean? So there's a lot to be done, but I'll go back in my last point. I think children, they are the best example of not knowing anything, and they get targeted by some old, evil. Like, how can you hate a child, because she's a refugee?
It's crazy. I love Yuri's comment, by the way. It's absolutely bang on.
But I was going to ask him about this comment. Sadly, the woke anti-Western movement is making this whole conversation harder. I got to tell you, I really, really hate the word woke, and I really hate it because it's a word that's been politicized. But to me, the true meaning of being woke is being a decent human being that cares about other people. So using it in this way, I'm like, sorry, Yuri, but don't use it. It's a horrible word. It's more buying into the politicization. I mean, because that's what we're dealing with, but it's politicization of people's lives and othering. If the person that is being othered by your politicians has no power, they're not your problem. They're a scapegoat, right? And we see it all the time. We're seeing Trump doing it. That the whole Haitian story, it's just appalling, and the impact that's having on the people, right? Any politician that is doing that sort of stuff, and this is the language of Hitler. This is the language of authoritarianism and fascism, and it goes back all through history. It happened in Rwanda. It happened in Croatia. Where somebody is your enemy within the community, and then they're not the people who created the problem, but the government's convincing you that they are the problem. And if we don't get a handle on that, we're in all sorts of trouble. Social cohesion is breaking down all over the world, and we break down with social cohesion, we lose it. We can't fight anything. That's one of the topics I've been thinking a lot more about lately, is social cohesion, because how sucked in people get to those messages, just like the mob. We saw the mob on the street in the UK a few months ago, right? How can we have not learnt from history? Like, it really concerns me.
It really is an educational issue to a large extent, and understanding actually how the economy works. And I'm always very happy to raise my hand, and hold it up and say I am 100% believer in capitalism. I would carry the cross for the sake of capitalism because I truly believe in it. Not only has it helped me greatly, I really, really believe in capitalism and what it does. What we need to stop doing is corrupt capitalism and the mechanisms of capitalism. And what the Western world has increasingly done in the last 25 years is trying to intervene in capitalism, because we don't necessarily always like the side effects. But capitalism will bring economic winners and economic losers. And the refugee situation is at the bottom of it. All conflicts that displace people is about economic reasons. And then, like Andrea says, you need to find an internal enemy to explain to people why you're worse off. That's the educational element. It actually, for different reasons. But if we do not tackle the climate crisis at the heart of it, the economic fallout will just keep increasing, and one of the symptoms will be an absolute explosion in climate refugees.
Yeah.
To believe that you can tackle the issue of people coming on boats to the UK or coming on boats across the Mediterranean and stopping the boats, etc. You can deal with the people that are profiteering from it, and that's like any criminal prosecution. But the underlying symptom is not going to stop.
Yeah.
Unless we actually tackle the root of the problem. It will just multiply. And then we need to figure, and here is where the capitalist hat comes in, and Nico certainly touched upon it earlier. People who come bring enormous economic value. Really big economic value. You might have people with great education, like the Syrian doctor. The NHS is crying out for people to come in with medical education. But even if you are not that educated, doesn't mean you have no economic value. It's like what you need to focus on politically is accepting that refugees will come and figure out how to benefit economically from them. It doesn't mean I'm going to put people into slave contracts. But there is also an economic aspect saying that whatever you left from, you're still going to be better off here. And most people actually want to work because that's how you integrate in a society.
Yeah.
And you don't need to earn top dollar. You need to earn something that brings you the sense of being worth something. And the focus for me is like, figure out how we're going to economically benefit from these people. Because they're an enormous resource that we have been gifted.
And need.
Europe is basically on a declining population. Countries like Italy and Germany are just not going to survive with current economic status quo unless they start embracing immigration coming in to actually prop up the population numbers. And it doesn't look all that much better elsewhere, possibly apart from France and the UK, where you have a little bit more underlying population growth. But the rest of Europe is very stagnant.
Yeah.
Focus on figuring out how we're going to benefit from this.
Yeah.
Because they are a resource that's sitting there that you see as an economic burden, not as an economic resource. And for me, with the capitalist hat on, it's like, this is a profit-making opportunity, and I'm going to seize it.
And building the infrastructure now. We know this. So it's like, you look at hospital beds in developing or in developed countries around the world shrinking. Why would they be shrinking when we've got an aging boomer population that we've always known we're going to have, that needs to be the medical care is going to be greater, right? So why aren't we planning ahead? None of our governments seem capable of it, right? But where is the land? There's land at the moment that nobody's occupying because it was too far north and too cold. Well, unless it's on permafrost, of course, there is space that is opening up around the world where humans can be migrating to. So why don't we get our refugee community who want to do it, go there and start building these new cities, but multinational cities. So not multinational, multi-nations, right? So it's not, we don't want tribal sort of cities being built like, like in Singapore when they built the Housing Development Board sort of towers. Everyone who lives in there's a percentage of different races in there, and they've kept it balanced so that they didn't have that the UK had with its housing, and it's not public housing, it's private housing. So it's a really clever system, right? It's something like the HDB system that's here. China's adopted it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we
adopt it,
think around these things in a multitude of ways, but I sense here we're stuck in a very, very old thinking.
Yeah.
And we're looking at old solutions. The old solutions are not going to work. This is a very dynamic, fast-paced environment. And I'm 100% certain the climate situation will not get better. It will get worse.
Yeah.
So if you think it was X this year, it's going to be 2X next year and 5X in 3 years' time or something like that. Because it's not going to be a linear growth. It's going to be exponential growth, because that's how all these things work.
Yeah.
So we need to start thinking a little bit dynamically about it. And if you want to tackle it, you need to tackle it at the root of the problem. Everything else is just cosmetics. And it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So
Nico,
small rant, get it over with. Like now we can move on to happy things and fun things.
So we'll finish up with comedy. Somehow you went from a small rural village in Zimbabwe to comedy in Glasgow. So to talk about that.
I think when I was at school in Zimbabwe, we used to have that, what's called, even it was in the village, we had a drama thing session. So every year we'll play, every class will have a play, like sketches, yeah. So for me, in the sketches, I was put as a car engine. It's like someone is driving a police car. I'm back, like, I'm making some noise. So I started giving these horrible rules at school. But anyway, when I was moved to other countries like South Africa, I never thought I'll do comedy. My friends would say, "Are you talking too much rubbish, this and stuff?" But they were laughing though. So I think in Scotland, always writing about stuff. I think for me, the most thing makes me write was about the culture differences. Like, there's so many things when I arrived in UK, to me, it was a joke, And like, maybe I should speak about it. Like, for example, when I arrive in London, I see people walking dogs. I'm like, what's wrong with these British dogs? They can't walk themselves, because in the villages, we don't walk dogs, right? So I was like shocked. So I started like that. Pick up all these things and make fun about myself. English is not my first language. Sometimes I read things wrong. Even today, people still misunderstood me. Another thing I think is good for confidence as well. You can think comedians are confident. Every time I go on the stage, I got this fright. I got this. There's this scary thing. It's not always. But once you pass that nerves, you automatically. That guy comedy show came 2017. I was working with a group from Ghana. They're dancers, Fanti Acrobatics International. Fantastic group from Ghana. Like really, really cool. It's a family show. They do like dancing. So they asked me to host the show, like introduce them, because they got like 5 sets. So they changed the first. I'm stuck with the audience. No one's laughing at all. I'm like, oh, this is not going to work out. So I wanted to quit the job the next day, because I'm like, the room is full of 200 people, not even one person laughing, because I'm not in the flyer. I remember that I just been called. So the audience, they bought the tickets to watch the dance, to watch the storytelling, not me. Right. So I struggled. The third day, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. I said, okay, guys, you're going to go home, right? You're going to tell your friends that the show was wonderful. Everything was great. But that guy, that's me. They die laughing. I'm like, I got it. So I used the same thing, and then it worked out and stuff like that. I'm still trying my best, and I ran open nights in Glasgow for 4 years, different. The other reason I want to be honest with you, because every time I try and talk to these Scottish comedians, they attack me. There's a very, very racial going on about the comedy circle. Racism is big. It's not only because of me, but I have to speak out sometimes, and then I get cancelled in some places.
Yeah.
But they love me. They're still on my Facebook. If they didn't like me, they should go. So it was very hard for me to be booked and whatever and stuff. So I started an African place, like a open mic. It was nice. Lots of Scottish comedians came to join me. It was really good. Then you always got the bad apples, like not everyone is bad, but I know some of them that can be really bad. So it infected my mental health when the attacks coming. Sometimes they cancel, no one's coming to your gig. Imagine the comedians canceling the same hour. It's like they've been texting each other. That can make you feel uncomfortable in your mind. So that's how I stopped last year. Beginning of this year, doing the open mics. I still do comedy. I was performing on Sunday, but running it can be a bit too much. But stand-up comedy as well, for me, there's a benefit for raising awareness. Like as an African, the jokes we make about, there can be jokes about sometimes it's serious. If you look at it, some of the stories personal, some of them it's really happening. Like I was writing something this morning, like when I came to Europe, I didn't know about the thing dating because my grandmother, she was doing that for me. African African grandmother, they drink tea together, they decide, So everything was easy. But now here you need to put an effort, 500 pounds on the side and dress up cool, whatever. And then, sorry, I just want to be friends. I've got 200,000 friends on Facebook. I don't need you. That's a joke. So comedy is good because I'm not good. When I mean I'm not good, if you are good, you should be on the BBC, right? That's what they say. I don't need BBC because they're controlling.
I admire comedians so much. I really do. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of comedians, but the one thing that's always very, very clear to me is nobody is funny unless they've got a hard story behind them. Because comedy today really is about dark humor. If you look at what's going on.
I'll just talk about myself. Not all the comedians, but I work with comedians. There's most of us comedians will have a very, very, very depressing stories like life. It's like it's kind of like, for me, it helps me to be confident, to feel like I'm part of this community because you can go somewhere, people can laugh people laugh, but when you move out of that circle, you go back home, you're alone. And deal with this asylum refugee and stuff. But if I can perform like 2-3 times a week, I feel like I'm part of this community. Someone laugh at me. Like back home, I don't have to do comedy to make my brothers laugh. No, it's automatic because that's a family thing. But now you don't have a family. You need to create this fit-in thing. Like that's why I got people laughing. Oh, I feel like I'm back again to that. When I was young, back home with my family, even if you're not fun, they'll laugh anything, right? But so it goes on. It's psychologically, it stays with you that I want to go back to that life where I used to be. Even if I'm not funny, everybody laughs. But how do you create that? That's why I become a comedian. Do something, because otherwise, if you sit down thinking about it, you're just destroying yourself.
Yeah.
Richard, were you going to ask something?
No, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're both saying. Is that I love comedy. It's one of the few things I watch on television, apart from sport, really. All the very, very best form of comedy has a very strong element of truth at the core of it. That's how it's actually funny. And you describing it as the hard stories behind it. Yes, there is that element of real life and real life experience that actually brings you to the level where people find it really funny. At least I do. Then again, I'm not mainstream, so maybe that doesn't work for everyone, but it certainly works for me in my sense of what I really enjoy laughing at is that border of dark and life experiences that brings you to perform and be funny about it. Another aspect which I think is incredibly important and something I think people like yourself have almost like a business story to sell is to go up on stage stripped down on your own, it's like a musician without amplifiers. If you're no good, it's going to be really hard. If I have amplifiers and light shows and smoke screens, I can be mediocre and it will still come out okay. And that is a way to actually almost educate people how it is to be on stage, what your body language should be out, how you're confident, how you need to speak, because it's actually difficult to articulate when you are on a stage with lots of people in the room. You might not always have amplifiers. You need to speak very clearly. Socrates and the stones, whatever, he had the marbles in his mouth when he was practicing to speak, in ancient Greece. I am still amazed when I go to conferences where you have pretty senior people speaking and how bad they are on a stage. Like really bad. You don't need to be great, Not everyone is Mick Jagger, right? But you need to be half decent if you're speaking in a public forum. And stand-up comedy for me is like, this is where you learn to do it. The body language, the articulation, how do you connect with an audience? If you're speaking at a public forum and you don't connect, there's no point being there. And if you're stand-up comedy, you need to connect. That's the whole essence.
Yeah. Before I go, Richard, when you speak, there's something catch. For me, I always tell the audience before I start, guys, English is not my first language. If you don't understand me, can you just Google it? You give an opportunity to Google it or not.
Yeah.
And I write this every time when I go to London, like now I'm thinking about this, it's going to happen. You don't have to laugh, guys, but it's true, Richard. When you're on the UK trains, there's this woman keeps saying, if you see something doesn't look right, please call the British Transport Police. So one day I get fed up about it. I went to the bathroom. I look at myself. I'm like, no, I don't look good. So I ring them up. Because English is not good. I ring them up. I'm like, I hear this woman keep saying, if I don't see something doesn't look right, I'll call you. They're like, oh, yes, they start panicking. Say, where are you? I'm like, I'm on the train to London.
Oh.
Well,
there you are.
Right? But anyway.
So just a final one before we go, because that was probably a risky call. You could have been arrested for doing something like that in this day and age. But just before we go, so the artists, the creatives, the musicians, they're all got a big part to play in sort of getting the message out around the world about what we need to do to give ourselves a chance at a future, right? And I think comedy is obviously a big part of that. How are you integrating the climate story into your comedic act, or you're not doing that yet? Because I think you could probably do some pretty amazing stuff.
No, we tried it in COP26. I was running open mic, so specific for the climate change. It's very difficult as comedian because it's not a joke. Climate change is not a joke. So it's quite difficult to work around it. But I only wrote one joke that time because I said, my brother always called me and said, Nico, we've been praying for rain, but the rain is not coming. I don't know why. I said, stop praying in English because God can hear you. So if he's praying in your own language, maybe God can give you rain. Stuff. I don't know. So yeah, comedians are willing to work with climate change. Don't get me wrong. There are seen online. There's so many comedians who are getting involved on climate change. Sometimes it's not about jokes as well. When we done on COP26, it was about kind of like people sharing stories as well. Like we had some delegates come from different countries, like Enga Met. I don't know if you know, she was there. Then there was so many few people just to be there as well, and then people talk. That was the beginning. For personal, I think it's hard to write jokes about climate change. It's quite a bit. I don't know. I think if it becomes like a storytelling, like in my tribe, there's a moment when they try to get under the tree, they're playing drums and people dancing. They're kind of like actually talking the spiritual to bring the good weather. Something like that. For us as artists, musicians, I think there's a possibility because everybody's got a story to tell.
All right. So when I look at so the Asia Pacific region, I was looking at the consumer spending power in Asia is just blasted past every other region of the world, and it's an area of it's a region of a great excitement about the future, like the Boeing announcement with its planes, right? Mm-hmm. So if I was advising comedians in this area, I would I would get them to focus on gorging of the planet, and every country's got its different cultures and values, and like the plastic cup with the plastic lid with the plastic straw and the plastic bag, that is used for 5 seconds then thrown in the bin. I'd take the piss out of that. But within a cultural context so that it's relevant to the local audience. So I think just looking at the excessive consumerism, the fast fashion hauls, you see it on TikTok, right? I'd do a skit where I was taking the piss out of that because it's so ridiculous. You got, 15, 20 items of clothing and you only keep one because the rest's so crap and it's so cheap, you throw it in the bin. You don't even send it back. That sort of thing. So I'd sort of maybe focus rather on climate change because, as you said, it's not funny, but the behaviors that we're all entertaining, going on a cruise ship, getting on a plane and go on a holiday that you don't necessarily need to do, or getting on a plane, going on a holiday to going and suffer from extreme heat in Greece during the summer. Why was anyone going to Greece in that heat wave, right? That sort of stuff. So I think that's maybe where comedy can sort of really focus. It's on our behaviors that are contributing to the bigger crisis.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about, I'm going to go now. I was thinking about, like, I always watch the Bushman documentaries. When they go hunting the bees, they don't never take the tree down. They go straight for the honey and they leave the tree standing. But the other nations, when they come, they cut the tree down and maybe in 4 pieces and take the bees. So the bees are homeless. Imagine, and it just goes on and on. So I was like, imagine if everyone can follow the Bushman's strategy, how they survive. They don't, actually, Bushmen, they never kill 5 elephants because of the horns. They only need 1 to eat. That's it.
Yeah.
So, and those people, they never brought to actually explain, to talk, because even the government fear them. That's why now in Africa, they move them to cities. And then they're suffering because they're not used to these lights and cars and stuff. You can see the stress they're going through, and because their land has been taken for whatever and stuff. So for me, what I'm trying to make the point, I'm learning from the Bushman how they live. I think if other nations can just follow that smart way of living, the planet will be a safe place.
Yeah, there's traditional elders of our lands right across the world. That's where we need to be focusing. It's not about less. It's not about suffering. It's just about calming it all down and being in balance with nature. Nico, absolutely awesome to see you. I wish you all the best in your career as a comedian. I think you're going to do amazing stuff. You've got a great smile, which I think is an important quality for a comedian. And Richard, great to see you. We've had some great chats. Comments. As always. Thanks for listening in, guys, and we'll see you in a few weeks because I've got to spend some time with important people. But take care, everyone. All right.
Take care. Have a good weekend, chat.
See you soon.